You write, the way to live is to regularly reinvent ourselves. Why is that?
Because it lets you live the fullest life. Imagine you live in a huge house and you spend your whole life just in the living room and you never leave the living room. People bring you food from the kitchen and they bring you your pillow from the bedroom, but you never leave the living room in your whole life. You're missing out. The idea is the default way you are is just one way of being. So if you want to live a full life and experience different ways of being in the world, you have to deliberately reinvent yourself, to push yourself away from your defaults and into something that feels unnatural at first, like the first time we ever got on a horse. It was not the most natural thing, but then somebody teaches you how to get into it. Same thing with trying on a different lifestyle, a different line of work, a different way of being in the world.
You followed that statement up with saying, every year or two, change your job and move somewhere new. What about depth? Because one of your other chapters, you talked about pursuing mastery, and sometimes that takes years, right? If we're changing all the time, how do we balance that with depth and long-term commitment?
Ultimately, this is where you have to use your preference. You have to look inside yourself enough to realize what makes you thrive, what makes you most deeply fulfilled, which may be going deep into one place, one career, one person, or it may be continuing to surf the surface. There are surfers and there are scuba divers, and neither one is wrong.
Yeah. I guess there's just certain seasons in our life where we do one thing and certain seasons where we do others, right?
Yes. The book How to Live ends with a picture of an orchestra seating chart with 27 instruments in the orchestra, not coincidentally to match the 27 chapters of the book. And the idea is you are the composer and the conductor that can use these philosophies like instruments. You can have a time in your life when you're completely driven to make money, and that's all your focus. You're not balanced, you're not deep, you're not mastering anything, you're just out to find the profit. And then let's say you get your income to a comfortable level, and now you shift your priorities to, say, giving back. And now you say, you know what, all of my needs are met, I'm turning my attention to giving. This is life. This is how it goes. You don't have to pick one and declare it to be the right answer. You just use what works for you now.
The seasons thing is so interesting, At the moment, I've just completely cut, aside from your books or these interviews, I've completely cut out nonfiction from my life. Because in another chapter, you say, just create, don't consume, right? And I just find that at a certain point, consuming is just mental masturbation. It's just, I feel like I'm being productive, but then I'm not really actually going to do anything, but it lowers my guilt just enough so I can keep surviving. And creativity begets creativity. You don't need to read more books to create. But then at a certain point, when I need inspiration, I think if we're really in tune with ourselves and we're honest with ourselves, we'll know to change to the other instrument, like you said, right?
I love it. Beautiful example.
What are some examples of your life where you reinvented yourself and what did you get out of it? Some insights that you gained out of it?
Sometimes the outside world presents you with a situation and you have to change your approach. And this is where philosophical flexibility comes in really handy. So if you were pursuing one path, completely focused on it, and then say, for example, you or your partner gets pregnant, then, okay, I might need to change my path right now. So that happened to me. That was very unexpected. We had actually deliberately decided not to have kids. And in fact, we had just broken up.
Oof.
And then she found out she was pregnant. So I had to change my priorities because looking after a brand new human is top priority over anything else. Nothing compares to that. Making money is not as important. Reading books is not as important. Creative output is not as important. Adventuring is not as important. By my value system, helping shape the emotional and mental and physical well-being of a new person is way more important than everything else. So that's one example in my life. When I sold my company, that was also unexpected. I thought I was going to run that company for the rest of my life. And then the business situation combined with a bunch of offers in 1 week. I got 3 offers in 1 week to buy the business. It felt like the universe was poking me in the face, telling me to take a hint. And so I sold the company, which I was not expecting. And I went from having some money to having way too much money. And I went from having no time to having all the time in the world. And I went from being bound to a place to being completely unbound. So suddenly in one day, everything changed. So I had to adapt.
Did you have an identity crisis?
Yes. Yeah. I had to adapt to the new situation because I had been living the old situation for 10 years. Suddenly the entire situation had changed. In fact, let's go somewhere unexpected with this. Cultural things. Many of my friends are from India. And in India for probably centuries, there has been this culture where it is the child's duty to take care of the parent when they're older. Because the economy for centuries was quite hand to mouth. Through your labor, you would earn as much money as you could consume this year. And so if you're in your 70s and your 80s and you're not able to work as productively, you don't have any savings because everything you did was just for now. And so it's the child's duty, since they're able to work, to take care of you. But it's 2025 and we live in a world where at least half of the world can save money and save for the future. And I think has an obligation to themselves to save for their future so that they're not dependent or a burden on others. So the situation has changed, but yet I hear people holding on to the traditions just because it's the way they're used to being. They're used to a world where it's the kid's duty to take care of the parents. It made sense in the old situation. It doesn't make sense in the new situation. So you have to update yourself philosophically to align with the situation, whether that's a baby or selling your company or living in a world where we can afford to save our money.
You actually jumped ahead to something I was going to ask you later, which is you wrote something along the lines of, "My son owes me nothing," which, me being East Asian, and like you said, South Asians have similar cultures as well, this idea of filial piety, piety, parent worship, literally, right? Where you must obey your parents, you must take care of your parents. And as you said, it's incredibly useful in a pre-social safety net world to make sure the old people aren't just discarded, right? They don't just starve to death. It was very useful on a society-wide level, but not so great for personal well-being, because you have this kind of just like cycle of abuse where the parents say, okay, well, it's my turn. I suffered. I needed to obey. Now it's my turn to make you obey. And nobody's really happy. So how did you jump to that conclusion of just, because I feel like a lot of people have children as a I won't die alone kind of insurance.
Oh, God.
How did you come to that?
Oh, God. To me, it's just clear thinking. It's respecting another person's life as an autonomous, fully featured human being, not as an object in your world. I would have a harder time understanding how somebody thinks that their child is some sort of object to their subject. How can you combine that with love? How can you love someone yet ultimately think of them as an object to serve you? I don't get that mentality. So, yeah, I wrote that in the book, and I tell him often that you owe me nothing. If you go out into the world and I never hear from you ever again, I will be happy that you must be having a great time. And if you're too busy to contact me, that's amazing.
I think you followed up by saying, You finally start to appreciate family once they're not forced upon you, something along the lines of that. That hit me so hard because I know so many Chinese parents who use this kind of ancient art of guilt trip in order to get their kids to do things where look how much dad sacrifices for you. Look at mom sweating over this hot oven, making you soup all day, whatever it may be. And then it just drives the kids absolutely miserable. But then it will have to come with like, oh, this is unconditional love from my part. But if love needs to come with obedience and what was it? You ask a Asian person, what's your retirement plan? What do you mean? You're my retirement plan.
Yeah. I heard a beautiful metaphor that if you hold a book too far away from your face, it's hard to read. But if you hold it too close, it's hard to read. There's a right distance for a book, and it's the same thing with your family. But wait, before we declare that as some kind of absolute truth because it's a cute metaphor, everybody's got their own family distance that works for them. Just because some book author has a healthy family and is telling you with a finger jabbed in your chest how you should be treating your family, that's not true for you. That's one way of looking at it, maybe that works for the person saying it. But I know a lot of people that have really abusive families where the best thing they could do is to cut all ties, change their name and disappear and not be found. I've got a good number of friends like this that I'm very thankful that they don't feel any obligation to serve their abusive parents.
Yeah, I mean, this idea, it's very deeply rooted in people pleasing, right? That for people pleasers to finally get to the point of, I am not obligated, I am not beholden to anyone, takes years and years and years. And I have these second cousins of mine who we have no blood relations, but we're basically like siblings, and I'm closer to them than I am with my blood cousins. And it's just kind of a great example of, blood doesn't really mean anything. It just means that you have an opportunity to be in close quarters with each other, and you might form a bond or you may not.
Yeah. My boy looks almost nothing like me. And I found that very useful as a reminder when he was a baby that I love him for him, not because he shares my DNA. He might as well have been adopted. I would love him absolutely the same. The blood connection is bullshit. Everybody has blood. It's more about the bonds you make.
Yeah, this is that thing where you see the British upper class men, when their moms die, they never cry at the funerals. But when the nannies die, they're always just sobbing and just dying because blood doesn't override time, right? If you spend the time, there's going to be a bond. If you don't spend the time, like no matter how much blood you have, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you had split up with your son's mother. So you're a single dad. What are you, 50 this year?
55.
So do you ever worry that when your boy ages out of the house, do you ever worry about being lonely? Or I think the biggest thing that a lot of people want to have a relationship is to deal with the fear of dying alone. Like, does that ever bother you?
Not in the slightest. Because of my situation. Because I put myself out into the world so much and I invite connection and I'm very public and I have this public email address and I come out here on podcasts and I go around the world and I meet people face to face too. As soon as my boy leaves the nest, I'm going to be a lot less lonely because that's when I also throw myself out of the nest. The only reason I'm in this nest is because of him. So as soon as he leaves the nest, I leave the nest, and then I can go out into the world, into Shanghai and Dubai and Bangalore and Berlin and London and New York and Mexico City and all of these places where I have hundreds and hundreds of people I can't wait to spend more time with. And I plan on doing that for the rest of my life.
I asked this because you have this one essay where you wrote about how you and your ex just one day just had an amicable breakup, where one of you said, let's break up. The other person said, okay. And you kind of parted ways amicably. And I think that kind of story would be incredibly unsettling for a lot of people because there's this idea that, you get married or you find a life partner. And once you say, I do, then that box is checked. That uncertainty box is checked for the rest of your life. And this idea that one day two people can just grow apart. I guess my question is, how do we accept the truth that people may not always feel the same way forever without being like this old, bitter, jaded person?
I think it needs abundance. Meaning, just like if you're trying to get fit to be attractive, to attract a mate, and you get a mate, it would be unwise to let your health go to shit and get obese and lethargic, not just for vanity, but just for your own health, for your own well-being. That would be unwise of you to do that. Same thing socially. Just because you found somebody doesn't mean you should stop reaching out to make connections. I think of all of us in motion, and by constantly reaching out, not just a one-time effort, like, well, I dated in my 20s and, well, now I'm done. It's a constant reach out effort because people keep moving, and by continuing to put yourself out there and deliberately meet new people, you're meeting people who are currently intersecting you right now. That in 2025, your interests may be as such, but in 2030, you will have a different set of interests. And by putting yourself out there at that time, you'll meet people who have intersecting interests at that point in life. And in 2040, you put yourself out there and you keep meeting people that are intersecting with you at that stage in your life. So you keep doing this so that you have many fulfilling connections in your life. Whether those turn into really dear, intimate friends or just lots of entertaining, shallow friends, both can be satisfying. I'm going to use the word intimate not in some kind of sex way, but it's a word I've been thinking about, the distinction between someone we call a best friend and just a friend or an acquaintance is the ability to get into the more vulnerable secret stuff that you wouldn't feel okay telling somebody you don't know very well. Some of that stuff we need to share with another person. And maybe we need to share it with more than just our partner. If you've gone and partnered up with one person, there might be a side of yourself that you need to share with somebody else. And again, I'm not talking about cheating, because it doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to be physical at all, but just somebody that you can have intimate, vulnerable conversations with. It's really a great life plan to keep finding those people, because you're still in motion and they're still in motion, and they'll come and go out of your life. You can have a best friend for 5 years that just moves on into a new situation, and then you find a new best friend that comes into your life for a few years, and some stick around forever, some don't.
My best friend here in Lisbon, she met a great guy, moved to New York at the beginning of this year, and that gave me the push to go out and make new friends. And now I've rebuilt a new friends group. I feel like it's the surviving the first one of those that kind of gives you the evidence of like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah. When my best friend suddenly one day dumped me, and I'm not talking, we weren't even in a relationship. It was just a best friend who then got into a relationship and just like one day suddenly called and said, I can't speak to you ever again. The rug was so pulled out from under me that I was devastated, but it helped me start journaling, because all of the things that I used to say in our conversations or turned to that friendship to confide, now without the friendship, I turned to the journal to confide. And it ended up being a great benefit for me. I felt like all of these thoughts were being saved instead of just tossed out the window.
How do you think we can have a continuous pipeline of interesting people coming into our lives?
Takes deliberate effort. You got to keep putting yourself out there into uncomfortable situations, like you signing up for a dance class. I loved that example. Going to a new place, if you can up and move to a new... Now, hold on, let me take it back. That creates a lot of initial loneliness. I think you just have to keep pushing into new social circles by putting yourself out there, whether that's putting yourself out there online, because maybe with your interests, the other people that are interested in this thing are spread vastly across the world and are not in your neighborhood. It doesn't have to be in person, but then it can take a deliberate scheduling of phone calls or meetups to make sure that those friendships stay active.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll meet people, especially people in their late 20s and early to mid 30s, who are just obsessed about dating. Just, it's the number one priority in their life. It's the only thing that they ever talk about. They're always talking about it, men and women. And I always just try to say to them, the fuel of your struggles in dating is your obsession with dating. Because if you were out there doing cool shit, you're going to attract cool people who are also doing cool shit. Time and energy is so zero sum that every minute that you're spending on Tinder or whatever it may be is a minute that you're not investing in an attractive life. And therefore, it's just going to be this negative feedback loop of the more time you spend on this, the less attractive you're going to be. And then it's just going to be making you spend more time on it and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Since we're on the subject, I broke up with my last relationship 2.5 years ago. And dude, this last 2.5 years has been the happiest time of my life because I'm not wanting a relationship. Maybe for the first time ever since I was 14. I actively do not want a relationship, and it is such a nice feeling to feel so whole that I'm not looking for another half, and to be so into what I'm doing in life that I'm not wanting to spend a single hour sitting around on a sofa with somebody trying to win their affection. I'm so into my life, and it's so liberating to not want a relationship. Like, even if one was handed to me, I do not want one. I'm so enjoying my life as is. Every hour of every day is filled with stuff I love doing. And being with my son. I mean, that's a huge part of it. I spend 30 hours a week with him. So that's maybe most of my social time is spent with my boy. And it's just so nourishing, so enriching. It's really nice to not have that hunger.
In How to Live, you wrote, we should try to fall in love as many times as possible. Do you think you'll be open to it somewhere down the line?
Maybe, but I kind of feel like I've done a lifetime of that. I knew a woman who went to Alcoholics Anonymous and was sober, and she would say that I'm not opposed to alcohol. Like, I don't mind if anybody else drinks. She said, I've just had more than my share for one lifetime. And that's a bit how I think about sex and relationships. I've had a lot of relationships. I've had maybe more than my share. So if I never have another one for the rest of my life, it's still been a really rich life full of so many relationships.
Last thing I want to touch on in terms of relationships is you wrote, beware of the feeling that someone completes you or will save you. What do you mean by that?
As soon as I sold my company, I told you that situation where suddenly everything had changed for me. I had this idea of going to India and staying for 6 months. And it seemed really exciting and a good challenge. And I called a dear friend and I said, can you think of any reason why I shouldn't do this? And she said, yeah, don't do it if you think it will make you happy. I went, oh, that's good. Wow. So you could fill so many things into that blank. Don't go chasing the hot person if you think it'll make you happy. It forces you to address the happiness or the lack of happiness in yourself directly before also pursuing something else for its own sake, not as a means to an end. So don't go to India to fill some gap in your life. Don't have a baby as a means to an end because you feel that your life is a mess and having a baby will somehow give you a sense of purpose. That's using another person as an object. Address the happiness or lack of happiness in yourself directly so that you can do something for intrinsic reasons and appreciate somebody for who they are, not what you need them to solve.
I thought the quote was just put so beautifully, and I asked that because I feel like so much of what we do, whether it's chasing someone or a career or money or a house, whatever it may be, it's the underlying, if this, then I'll be happy. If this, then I will like myself. If this, then I'll finally be good enough. And the answer almost is always, no, it didn't solve your problems, right?
Yeah. Though we should caveat to say, sometimes doing the thing actually makes you happy. If you've been driving an old crappy car that keeps breaking and has no heating, you get the new car and actually it really makes you happy. Your life is so much easier now. It can make you concretely happier.
I think this is a really nice segue into money. You have this one quote that kind of froze me when I read it. Your biggest obstacle to getting rich is the harmful meaning you've attached to it. Can you elaborate on that?
I hear so many people say billionaires are the problem. Greedy rich people. Capitalism is exploitation. There are so many truisms about money where people just say it like it's a known fact. Like a square has four sides and money is the root of all evil. But then that belief is useful if you just want to sit at home with nothing, feeling smug and justifying your inaction. But there might be some opportunity for you to go make the world a better place that as a side effect would also pay you a lot of money, and you might find yourself avoiding that pursuit because you've subscribed to the truism that money is evil and anybody rich must have stolen that money from others. I noticed this with a friend. Actually, I'll say who it is because it's kind of interesting. Why not? You know the song Mad World? All around me are familiar faces. The guy who sang that, Gary Jules. He and I were walking down the streets of Los Angeles. He's such a smart, interesting dude. We always would have these wonderful conversations. And we walked by a Starbucks. He had just said he wanted a coffee. We walked by a Starbucks and he said, anywhere but there, big corporate place. And I said, you know, Gary, if CD Baby keeps growing, I might be that big corporate guy. You can't just look at Howard Schultz and say, what an asshole, because his thing took off. His little coffee shop in Seattle took off. He did something right. People loved it, and it grew like crazy. That doesn't mean he's a bad person. In the same way that if I started something tomorrow that grew like crazy, it would be wrong of everyone to immediately think I'm an asshole because my thing got successful. I think it can be more empathetic to imagine what it's like to be Howard Schultz or Bill Gates. Somebody that started a thing, worked really damn hard to put that thing out into the world, and people really liked it and it became a huge hit. That could be you.
I feel like anybody who's read Hans Rosling's Factfulness will understand this, because our world has objectively gotten better in every metric you can imagine, child mortality, poverty, whatever it may be. And that comes from abundance, and that comes from making money. There are greedy corporate people, of course there are, but at the same time, good needs to come from abundance. If we're all just scraping by, we're not going to have anything extra to do any good. And like you said, Some people just like to feel smug. And whenever I hear people complain about certain things, I just say, what are you doing about it? Oh, nothing? Okay, don't talk to me. Because if you're actually one of these people, one of these hippies that's making your own freaking deodorant, I can at least respect that. You are committed, and I can at least respect that. There's another quote, charge money to make sure your creations are going to people who really want them. People don't value what's free. Charge for their sake as much as yours. Now, there are a lot of listeners out there who just feel icky or just some kind of guilt about charging for, especially if it's like an intangible, let's say it's their art or some kind of service, they feel icky about charging. What do you say to that, and how do you think we can reframe that?
Just like our earlier subject about don't get into a relationship or have a baby because you think it'll make you happy, there's a deeper problem there. If you're deeply unhappy and you're looking for a relationship to make you happy, you need to address that unhappiness in yourself first. So same thing with this low self-esteem that feels that people shouldn't give you money for what you do, for feeling that what you do is not valuable. You need to address that low self-esteem in yourself first and realize, ideally, that what you're making has such concrete value that even this artwork that somebody could put on their wall or in their headphones would make them so much happier that they would be happy to hand over $10 or $100 or $1,000 for this thing. It's easiest when you're doing something that will also make people money. Like when I was running CD Baby, I had created a place that somebody could sell their music to the world. And it was $35 to set you up in my system. And once you were there, thousands and thousands of strangers were going to be checking out your music, and hundreds of them would buy it. So I could wholeheartedly say, this is very worth the $35. In fact, I could probably charge $100 and it would be worth it. I had no qualms about saying that because, again, it wasn't me. I'm not saying give $100, give $35 to me, Derek. It was more like I built a system that you can use to go sell your music. The point is, it starts with the knowing that what you're doing is concretely valuable to somebody else.
This is that tail wagging the dog thing, right? Where sometimes I'll meet someone who says like, my goal is to get to 1 million subs by whenever. And I'm like, why do you deserve the 1 million subs? What have you done? What value are you creating to deserve the 1 million subs? Back in the day, whether it's Michael Jackson or whomever, they were famous because they were great. And now we have people that are just famous for being able to hijack attention. And it's like, what is his name? Seth Godin talks about how you should be offering so much value that people are tripping over themselves to give you the money, and they would still feel like it's a bargain, or else they wouldn't give you the money.
Yeah. And that's it. If you focus not on what you get, but focus on the giving, focus on the generous giving of value, of knowledge, of a service, and what you get is just a side effect. That should never be the main point. The money, the number of subscriptions in YouTube or whatever, that's like the odometer on your car. That's not the point. You should never be looking at the odometer on your car as the point of driving. It's a side effect of going where you want to go.
This is one of those things that just takes a lifetime of messing up to realize, in terms of sometimes going directly towards the thing is actually keeping you from the thing, and you need to take an oblique path towards it. Like Boeing, when they were focused on aviation and making the best planes, their profits were just rolling in. And then they changed CEOs to a more traditional kind of accounting type CEO that just, okay, let's cut costs and maximize profits. And they killed the goose that laid the golden eggs, and their profits started going down. And then they switched back to the aviation CEO, and the profits went back up again.
Yeah. You say it's something we have to learn the hard way, but I think it really helps that people like Seth Godin, people who are putting good ideas out into the world. Even, hell, what you're doing with this podcast. You didn't have to do this. You're going through the effort of scheduling and putting and editing it and releasing it to help put good ideas into the world. So ideally, some young person listening to this can grow up with this mindset, thinking that the key to business success is generosity and is of providing value, not some kind of scammy, here's top 10 ways that you can get 1 million subs without any effort. Ideally, you put healthy thoughts into someone else's brain to help shape the way they think from the beginning so they don't have to learn the hard way.
I would love to hear your thought on this because I'm split. On the one hand, I absolutely agree that, having these things out there is very useful. But what I find is a lot of times they really only help me when I'm ready to hear it. So I have this thing I'm discussing with a friend called level 100 wisdom, which is sometimes you'll try to give someone level 100 wisdom when they're only ready for level 20, and it's not going to go through their ears. For example, in all of my 20s, I was just chasing hot women and trying to have sex with as many hot women as I can because I thought that would finally make me feel good enough because of the attention that I didn't receive in high school. And it took a decade of wasting my time to realize my problems didn't go away. Nothing went away. My complicated relationship with my parents, my lack of fulfillment in my career, none of that went away. You think, getting this girl would, but it didn't. But then if I told someone who's never had a girlfriend, if I tell them, hey, having sex with hot women or having sexy girlfriends not going to fix all your problems, he'll tell me, fuck you. So the ear has to be ready for it as well.
Yeah, that's life. That's learning. You could say nobody teaches anyone anything. It's the learning that's the active verb. The student has to pull the information into their brain. You can't force it in. I can tell you one tiny idea that hit me at the right time and changed my life. And it was a book called How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. And I read it just as I was selling my company. So I didn't need to get rich, but I was just browsing a physical bookstore in San Francisco and saw this title, How to Get Rich, with this audacious cover of a fat bearded guy on a throne. And I started flipping through, and it changed my life because it was written by a guy who made $700 million in the publishing industry, blew his money on drugs and prostitutes, and he kept pursuing more and more money. And then he said, I can tell you now, at the age of 68, filthy rich, if I had to do it all over again, I would have stopped after the first 20 or 30 million, which is enough for anyone for life, and I would have spent the rest of my life planting trees and writing poetry. I regret my further pursuits of money. I should have stopped at that point. And I read that just as I was selling my company for $20 million. And it just hit me at the right time. I said, I'm going to take this guy's word for it. I'm going to stop making money now. And I have. I have not made $1 since 2008. I took his advice. It hit me at the right time.
Having it in your head, even if you're out making mistakes, I feel like is very useful, because if you don't have the idea in your head, then maybe when you get to that certain pain point, oh, that insight is there. Oh, okay. It wouldn't. You'll just kind of keep going.
Good point.
And I find that sometimes I'll hear some wisdom that I would kind of dismiss, but then if I get to a certain pain point, oh, that's what Dad meant, or that's what, Derek or Mark Manson or whomever meant at that time. So I guess they can coexist, where you need to be ready for it, but at the same time, having it is definitely better than not having it.
Good point. You're right. That's happened just as well to me too, that I took in some wisdom, even from an article, and then when that pain point came, that wisdom came back. Very good point. Thanks for mentioning that.
To wrap up, I want to play a little game. We didn't get a chance to do this last time because of my technical difficulty. You're known for your intellectual flexibility. What did you say last time? If I stop changing my mind, I'll be a dead fish. So what have you, let's say in the last year or two, changed your mind on?
Ooh. Fossil fuels. I recently read a book called Fossil Future that explained that we should not be aggressively phasing out fossil fuels because most of the world still needs them. And for the privileged, abundant first world economies that perhaps don't need them, to be dictating that the rest of the world should stop using them literally kills people. There are hospitals in Africa that don't have enough fuel to create electricity to keep an incubator running for a newborn baby. And so the babies die because they don't have enough gas to run the generator. And to say that they should stop using gas is murderous. So I've stopped thinking of fossil fuels as objectively absolutely bad. That was a big one. I've stopped thinking of the Chinese government as evil, and I can see the line of thinking that has run things really well for the last 50 years. I admire it now, whereas I think it's villainized by the American media because maybe the governments are at odds with each other over some things, but the people of China and the people of India have no qualms. Of America. The people of China and the people of America have no qualms. In fact, I find Chinese people in general very similar to Americans in general, a very similar entrepreneurial, ambitious energy that's really, really kindredy. I think I get it more now and I appreciate it. Let me do a third one and then I'll stop.
Do you want to hear one of mine and then we'll come back to your third one?
Yes, please.
I guess this is kind of related to your Useful Not True book. This is a useful not true idea. A friend of mine told me about this book title that I never read the book, but it's called Everything is Figure Outable. And I just love that and it just stuck in my mind. I remember reading Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled, and he talks about how he saw his neighbor fixing a lawnmower, and he's saying to his neighbor, "Oh, you're so handy. I could never be like you." And the neighbor, without even looking up, said, "It's because you don't take the time." And Scott got a little offended. He's like, "What does he mean I don't take the time, huh?" And then he got to his office, and one of his patients, her handbrake was broken. So he gets into a car, and he remembers what his neighbor said, and he lies down on the floor of the back seat, and he just stares at the mechanism under the seat, and he just looks at it for about 5 minutes without doing anything. And then he saw, oh, this connects to that connects to this. If I just tuck this thing out of the way and broop, 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 okay, the handbrake works. And realized it's because I don't take the time. And especially, I was a late adopter of large language models, especially in the age of ChatGPT, truly, there is no excuse. Everything is figure outable. Pretty much 99.99999% of things are figure outable. And if you want to just sit back and be a victim and complain about whether it's, I don't know, men's fault or white people's fault or whomever, you can do that. You're just going to be more miserable. Because I have this friend of mine, he's an Indian guy. His part of South India, he says genetically they have a more of a propensity to put on belly fat because of starvation. So they are more adapted to starvation. So he's an overweight Indian guy living in Europe that's pretty racist to Indian people. And so dating is not easy, but he's lost, I think, like 50 pounds and he doesn't make any excuses. I respect him so much because it's just like, he can complain about racism or he can just make his life better. And he's like, everything is figure outable. So that's been an incredibly powerful, useful, not true belief.
I love that. In fact, I think we should stop there because it ties together last conversation and this conversation, because getting rich is something you could do, that anybody listening to this, the skills of making money are figure outable. And you learn about it and you go put yourself out there and you do it. And oh my God, it works. And suddenly you have, or eventually, let's say not suddenly, eventually you have $1 million, then $10 million in the bank. And suddenly you're one of those people that you had othered and thought were a different breed of people, but it can be you. And same thing with fitness. And I love that you brought up dancing in the last episode. People who dance, they seem like a different species. I will never be one of those species. No, but it's something you can take a few lessons and learn how to do. Being a great parent is totally doable. It's not that hard. You just catch yourself at those few moments when your temper wants to yell, but you bite your tongue and you think, what's the right thing to say now? And you say the right thing and voila, you're a good parent. All of these things are figure outable. All of these things are doable.
What did you say? The only difference between the successes and the failures are that the failures gave up.
Yes, I love that idea that there is no such thing as failure until you declare it to be over. Until then, you're still just trying. That say you want to write a great novel. You haven't failed until you've stopped trying to write a great novel. Until then, you're still just trying. You're in the process of writing a great novel. And it's only at the point when you say, I couldn't do it, I failed. What that means is you've stopped. If you don't stop, then there is no fail. You just keep trying.
Okay, well, this has been fantastic, Derek. I mean, I can talk to you for hours and hours. Where can people find you?
Sive.rs.
You heard it. Derek Sivers, thank you, man. Really appreciate you. Love to speak to you soon.
I love that we have a similar pursuit. I actually think we're quite kindredy in our pursuit of exploration and self-improvement. I think it's really cool that you and I have a similar approach to life. And this whole conversation, I felt like could have been flipped around, and almost anything either one of us said could have been either one of us saying it. So really great to get to know you better. Thank you.